So, who here owns an Airbnb property? Yeah, going to talk a little bit about the performance of the Airbnb listing itself. But before we get into the numbers, I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the things to consider, before purchasing a property, before identifying what you want to do exactly, and really nail down that strategy. So, first off, location. Location matters for all types of real estate investing, and short-term rental is no exception, right? Location for a couple of reasons: tourist hotspots, food and entertainment, walkability, and transit, right? Just general things that people think about when they're planning a vacation, when they're traveling, right? What do people want to do, right? So where do people want to go? First off, tourist hotspots, right? Generally speaking, if a city is generally high traffic for tourism, right, you're going to be able to charge a little bit more for your Airbnb listing. So just with Megan's example, comparing to Langley, right, it's it kind of shows in the nightly rate of about 130, 136 per night. It kind of shows that there's less demand out there for tourists, right, naturally. And compared to Vancouver downtown, we'll look into the numbers a little bit in a second here, but we can kind of see that Vancouver is a hotspot in terms of vacations, tourism, and people come here for a good reason, right? It's a world-class city. So with this one, I selected Vancouver, Yaletown specifically, the neighborhood, right? And why Vancouver? Why Yaletown? So first off, you have a bunch of shopping in the whole Yaletown district. You're about a 5-minute walk away from Pacific Center for all your shopping needs. Amazing food scene. So even just in Yaletown itself, never mind Vancouver and the surrounding cities, Yaletown itself has many, many food options for all types of cuisines, right? And you have easy access to outdoor activities. So Stanley Park, you go up north a little bit there, you can explore the park, bike the seawall, walk the seawall. Go up further north, you have hikes. You can explore the mountains up there in North Van and West Van. And I mean, we're surrounded by water, so anyone who's interested in water activities, paddle boarding, sailing, all that good stuff, right? So with good reason, you can kind of see why Vancouver is such a great destination for a lot of people, looking to travel. So the spot. So this is a building specifically, the one that we have on Airbnb, located in Yaletown. The address is 933 Seymour Street. The building name is called The Spot, and this is I guess, notoriously known as an Airbnb building for a couple of reasons. So first of all, it is Airbnb friendly. It doesn't have restrictions in the bylaws that disallow the purpose of Airbnb. So a lot of the times, if you look into the strata bylaws for most of these apartment buildings, across the Lower Mainland, they're going to be very, very clear about short-term rentals and how it isn't permitted, right? So most of the time, we'll see rental restrictions of minimum 30 days, for example, right? So if you do that, then obviously it's not very Airbnb friendly, because if someone is looking to stay for a couple of nights or a couple of weeks, right, then that strata bylaw, completely takes that out of the option, right? On top of that, with this building, there are actually many Airbnb hosts as well. So the good thing about that is because strata bylaws are, they're not set in stone, right? Every year at the AGM, at the very least, that's something that they will always revisit, and it's something that will come up, right? So there is always a possibility, right? It's never guaranteed. There's always a possibility that Airbnb, restrictions or regulations can be voted into place. But the good thing about this, the reason that I like this building, is because there are a lot of Airbnb hosts. So there are a lot of people in favor of Airbnb, and we'd be voting against any, bylaws and restrictions against that, right? And then on top of that, something that people don't necessarily always think about is that there's easy self-check-in for your guests, right? I know some buildings out here in the Lower Mainland do require you to have someone physically check the guest in, just for security purposes, right? But that can be a little bit awkward for the guest, and if there's miscommunication, right, it can just be a whole mess, right? So if if you have self-check-in like this building does, for example, instructions are clear, you have the videos laid out, right? It makes the guests very at ease to locate the home and make their way in there, with no awkwardness, right? So seasonality. This is something that affects the Airbnb rates throughout the year. So a couple of factors that affect it: weather, holidays, events. It's the entire year is different, right? Just looking at where we currently are in the summertime, right? This is typically where you're going to notice the highest rates and the basically the highest revenue generating season, right? So summertime, we're going to get into the numbers. I'll show you that in a little bit as well. Wintertime, you'll see fall and wintertime is generally when your nightly rate will start to drop. And then, you know, holidays and events, holidays are a big one as well. Generally, you can charge a little bit more for holidays, long weekends, for example. Right? Long weekends are really good because it could be someone maybe just doing a road trip up from Seattle, for example, right? Not too far away, right? They can make their way up for the weekend. And with that, right, you can charge a bit of a premium on your nightly rates there. And then events, if there's, I don't know, maybe concerts or maybe specific tournaments or whatnot, right? People who are willing to pay for these events, first off, are going to be willing to pay the premium as well on the nightly rates. So to follow up with that, you know, like I mentioned, throughout the year, your nightly rate is going to change. And we have seen that the summertime is the best in terms of how much you can charge per night. And in the past year, we kind of just looked at the numbers there. July, this month actually, was our best performing month in terms of average nightly rate. So out of all the bookings, you know, that we had in this current month, our average nightly rate is $425 a night. And keep in mind, this is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath in YALETOWN, right? So imagine if you had a 2-bedroom, you could charge a little bit more for that just because you can have more guests sleeping in there. And we found that February of last year in 2022 was actually our worst performing month. So that there we were charging on average 180 per night. You can see there's a pretty big drop, you know, between the two months there. So, you know, we kind of do the math and your average nightly rate is about $287 per night. So, I mean, you can kind of do the math yourself if you know roughly what your occupancy is, you know, out of the 365 days in the year, right? If you know exactly how many days you're going to have that booked and have people stay there, right? Multiply, you know, those days by that rate, and that would be essentially how your unit would be performing, right? And how much revenue you're getting per year. Occupancy.
What is your, can I ask one quick question, or do we do that later?
You can ask.
I know your average score, but what's your most frequent? What's your median salary? Do you know?
Median salary? Like the
yeah,
nightly?
like, you know, you have like summer, which is going to pull up your average because it's astronomically large. But like you say 200, but that's not really the average. Like, what's the price that you charge most frequently? And what's the occupancy rate at that price?
Well, that is the average. That 280 right here. Yeah, this is the average. I was just highlighting the best performing month. So we're not trading 425 a night every single day in the summertime. That still fluctuates. You know, even in July, you know, there are some nights that are maybe a little bit less, right? Maybe around 400, and then some are maybe about 430, 445, right? And like I said, I'm just highlighting the best performing month just to kind of give you an idea of, you know, where the cash is really coming from. And then also highlighting the worst performer, right? Just to show you where the slow season is. Crunching all the numbers there together with the total revenue and then, you know, dividing that by the number of nights it's been booked, the average is 287. Question in the back?
I'm curious to get 2,200, how many nights?
Okay, sure. Occupancy rate. So this is a bit of a chart that kind of highlights the occupancy rate. So not necessarily the number of nights booked specifically, but the percentage of the year that there are people staying inside the unit. So you can kind of see it starts in July 2022 at the very beginning here, and then currently today, July 2023. So it's a chart for the past year, and you can see it starts off at about 75% of last year, July. Slowly ramps up. September was quite good for some reason. I think we got a little bit lucky there, and then we do see a drastic, very, very sharp drop there in November into the fall, which is again expected because the fall into the winter time is a little bit slower for several reasons. I mean, summertime for one is when people are mostly traveling, right? It does die down in the winter time, and that's just not, you know, not just Vancouver specifically. That's sort of just a general traveling and vacation statistic. And then into December, it pulled up a little bit, and I think that has to do with the holiday, right? You have Christmas, people are getting together, Perhaps you might have individuals or families coming up, to visit family that they have in Vancouver, for example. And then into the new year, January was pretty strong, not too bad. February was interesting. So as we saw in 2 slides ago, February was actually our worst performing in terms of nightly rate, so the amount of revenue that we're charging per night, but it actually had a very high occupancy. So most of the days there in February were booked, but at a lower rate. And then March, again, we take a bit of a hit there in terms of occupancy, and we spike back up as we get into the summertime here. So it just gives you a visual of basically how often your Airbnb will be booked and how often you're gonna have people staying in there, right? So again, that's just to highlight that. And that worked out to be roughly 89.5% in terms of the average occupancy rate out of the whole year.
We had 100% for those stressful months to say.
I mean, technically it's possible to hit 100% for the year, in a sense, but you have to keep in mind of the logistics as well, right? So if someone checks out, then obviously someone has to go in there. If you have a cleaner, or whether that's yourself, to clean up the property, change the bed sheets, the linen, stuff like that, right? So assuming that every single guest is maybe checking out in the morning and every single guest is checking in the evening, then you could technically have 100%, right? But some guests are gonna maybe request for a later checkout, and some people are gonna be, oh, my flight's a little bit earlier. Can I check in at 2 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. or whatever, right? So technically it's possible. I don't think it's realistic. Maybe 95% would be a more realistic number, but 100%, I don't think it would be just realistic to shoot for. Yeah. So with all that, with the occupancy, with the number of days that it was booked, all the nightly rate numbers crunched together, the total revenue for the year was just short of 70,000, right? So I mean, if you put that just to put that in perspective, right? 70,000, you divide that by 12 per month, that's just over 5,800 per month, right? So this is gross. Yeah, I'll show you. I have the pro forma at the end as well, so we can break down all the numbers together. So this is just the gross, and again, if you divide that by 12, your monthly revenue there is just over 5,800, right? Where are you going to get 5,800 per month in rent from a long-term tenant? That's not happening, right? The average for a 1-bedroom in Vancouver, I believe right now is 2,700 roughly, just over 2,700. So this is more than double that, right? So you can really see where the cash flow is quite strong, where the potential is with Airbnb and short-term rentals. And we have the pro forma here just to break down some of the numbers, right? Most of them are there. There are a few things that we've left out just to keep things a little bit simple, right? So we have purchase price of $825, and then all the good stuff here with about $5,830 in monthly revenue when you average that out. You have mortgage. Mortgage was, of course, a lot lower about a year ago, right? That's gone up since. And yes, we're on variable, right? So it's currently sitting at about 6.25%. But even with that, we are still cash flowing, right? And that's with all the fees as well, right? So insurance, taxes, strata fees, for example, right? So we can kind of see that here. Taxes monthly are roughly $130, insurance $125, utilities $100, internet $50, condo fees $455. So those are your expenses there, about $5,200, and that leaves you with a cash flow of $615, right? So the proof is there, the results are there. Airbnb, is very lucrative, and the cash flow potential is there when done correctly. And I think looking at the numbers and looking at the performance of this listing as well, there is potential to have it go up to about 80,000 in revenue. But that's a discussion for another day. Just with respect to time today, we'll kind of have to cut it short. But I think that there are some things, there are tweaks and tips and tricks that you can kind of incorporate to bump up revenue there. But again, that's a conversation to have another day, but you know where to find us. So that's all I have for today.